Welcome to the 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel. I'm your host and managing partner of 76 Capital, and I'm really excited that you've joined this show today because we have a really special guest. His name is Randy Boe, and we're going to tell you all about the things that he's done over his career, and it's incredibly amazing, all the things that he's done, as well as what he's doing next with us here at 76 Capital. So excited to be talking about that. As you know, you can reach me at Wayne Kimmel all over the internet. It's even now down here, this side, that side. I don't even know what side, this side of the screen. There we go. If you're watching, I just had my hands all over the place, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, we have a great producer back in the studio, James Santor. He's James Santor at James Santor. You can find him all over the internet as well using that. James is doing amazing things, bringing back the LaSalle baseball program. I know that may be a little early, but I know he's doing incredible things with that, and hopefully that does happen. So also at 76 Capital, as you know, we are all about working with people that are passionate, that are smart, that are nice, and want to change the world. And if you're one of those people, and you're one of those entrepreneurs, you're one of those executives, you're an athlete who wants to do something next, this is the place to come, 76 Capital. So find us all over the internet at 76 Capital, on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram. We're all over the place. Our podcast can also be found on all the major podcast networks. So subscribe, like it up, give us all your comments. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all your support in all the things that we do at 76 Capital. And as I said today, we have a great guest on our show. His name is Randy Boe. He's now a senior advisor as part of our 76 Capital sports advisory business. Super excited to have him as part of that. He's the former general counsel at AOL. We're going to talk about that. He helped found and transform Monumental Sports with the likes of Ted Leonsis. I can't wait to hear some of those stories. And he was the commissioner of the AFL, the Arena Football League. You can find Randy on Twitter at Randall Boe, and that's a great place for you to find out all the things that he's done. Randy, welcome to our show.
Hey, it's so great to be here. Really great to be here.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, and we're excited to have you as a senior advisor now at our 76 Capital Sports Advisory business. I know our president, Dan Bravado, over there is fired up and ready to have you as part of our team, and it's awesome to have you as part of everything that we're doing here.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I'm so pleased for the opportunity to be working with you guys at 76 Capital, because as you say, it's you guys are right at the edge, where emerging sports are meeting traditional sports, and I think that's a really exciting place to be, and I think that's where the whole world is heading. So I'm excited to say that like 3 times in 2 minutes. So,
well, thank you, and I appreciate that. We at least we have someone with some real credibility that shares our views.
Let's not go too far there. But
well, Randy, one of the great things that we do on our 76 Capital Leadership Series is really get to hear the backstory of our guests. And that's one of the things I'm excited about, because your career, you've done some incredible things in your career. And so why don't we do this? Let's get started. Let's kind of go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? And what were some of the things that you did, just back when you first were growing up and through high school and college and some of that stuff? That'd be great to hear.
So I grew up in Iowa City, Iowa. My dad was a professor at the University of Iowa. So, of course, I was always a Iowa Hawkeye fan. Used to go to games all the time. Used to sneak into the football stadium. And we would do kind of the cluster thing where like 6 of us would just like sprint in, and we'd figure that they'd only catch 1 or 2 of us at most. So, but that was loved Iowa Hawkeye sports. My dad was in the business school and did a lot of work around computing. And this is very early. This is like the early 1970s. And so I got from a very early age and at a very early time, kind of access and education around computers. And I was pretty fascinated. So, life moves forward. I go to the University of Wisconsin, and
wait a second. Big Iowa guy.
I know, right?
And going to Wisconsin. Well, how did that go over in the family?
It was fine. It was fine. I mean, having grown up in Iowa City, it was definitely time to, as they say, stretch my wings and go elsewhere. So I don't think there were any hurt feelings. It was definitely the right move for me.
Did you come home wearing the red and white?
Well, okay. So this is a sore point in my family, because to be really honest, I kind of became more of a Badger fan than a Hawkeye fan over the years. And is it because Wisconsin has one more? I mean, I'm not gonna. If I'm going to be honest with myself, yeah, that's probably part of it. So, but I root for both teams, and I always, when they play each other, I give myself the option of rooting for either one. So,
they're two very good choices, no doubt. No doubt.
Yes, absolutely. So, and then I went to I moved to Philadelphia and went to Penn for law school, and loved it in Philly. I know you're a Philly guy. And, went into practice as a litigator and did a whole bunch of trials and antitrust work. I mean, all over the map. But I got the opportunity to, I was really interested in computers still, always pushing that. And, this is like 1994, 1993. And so there's this thing, the internet, that's out there. And to access it, you have to have what's called a shell account. So like netcom.com. I was Arbo at netcom.com. And you had to teach yourself some Unix commands, because there was no web browser yet. It was just a command prompt would just sit there. So you had to type in the right Unix commands to get like the email client or the chat client. It's a whole different world, obviously. And I got the opportunity to represent a guy pro bono who claimed to have the first online newspaper. I don't know if that's true or not, but he always said it was true. And it was called the American Reporter. And so he wanted to sue because there was some legislation in the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that discriminated against the kind of content that could be available on the internet. So, it was the fight between whether you could have indecent content or whether indecent content was outlawed or whether it was just obscene content that was outlawed. And so we took that lawsuit along with a companion lawsuit in Philadelphia and established that under the First Amendment, that it was the same as other media, that the line was at obscenity, not indecency. Anyway, from that, I get the opportunity to go to AOL, America Online, which at the time had, I don't know, a couple million members. It was based in a kind of a shabby office park behind a Cadillac dealership in Northern Virginia. And Steve Case and Ted Leonsis and all those folks were there, but no one really knew, what this was. People were just starting to use the internet. You were still dialing in at 2400 baud or 4800 baud and hearing those connection sounds. And I went there, and everyone in my law firm and my friends all thought this was the most insane thing that anyone could ever do. Leave the security of a big law firm and go to AOL, which most of them, frankly, had never heard of and didn't really seem like, it was moving in the right direction.
Well, Randy, because people were saying it was all Prodigy at the time. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. So
the competition, either one at the time.
Right. So the competition was Prodigy and CompuServe. Those were the existing ones. And I actually had a CompuServe account way before I had an AOL account. I'm going to confess things like that. But I also had a Prodigy account, and I used it because I was very big into fantasy baseball. To the point where it had started to become maybe an issue in my personal life. And Prodigy had this great front end, so you could put your team in there, and as opposed to you having to calculate scores, it did it for you. I was like, this is a huge advance in fantasy sports. But so anyway, we build AOL, and it was such a fascinating job and a fascinating time because everyone's discovering the internet. Things are exploding. We're facing all these issues that no one had ever faced before. And frankly, we had no idea what we were doing a lot of the time. I mean, we kind of thought through and like, well, maybe we could try this and maybe we could try that. And then we just went out and did it. So it was a pretty exciting and terrifying time. exciting and terrifying all together.
Well,
But
let me interrupt for 1 second. I mean, we're really
Sure.
excited to have Randy Boe as our guest on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, telling his story of going to work at AOL in the very, very early days. And I have to ask you, Randy, so, I mean, I just remember you would go to your mailbox and there was an AOL or America Online discs, right? I mean, I remember I was in law school at the time when you guys were putting this all out. And I remember just even when I first got my first AOL disc, it was, or America Online, I guess it was originally called, right? And I was able to, my brother would call me and he was still in high school and he would say, Wayne, you know, can you give me the score of the game it was like, I could give him a second quarter score before the radio would tell him what the score was. I mean, he thought I was cool back then.
Well, that was one of the things, you know, we had in the sports channel on AOL, and we actually had a little bit of a fight with the NBA, but we had like a real-time sports ticker. And what it really was like some guys sitting in their living room watching the game and then just inputting the scores on a real-time basis. There was no, and then people had pagers back then, you know, those little data text pagers. So you could also get it that way, like, oh, it's, you know, Milwaukee 52, Orlando 48, right? It was the most useless, but cool. And it was funny, the NBA, the Stats Incorporated had that service, and Stats and AOL got sued by the NBA because they said that we weren't allowed to have a real-time feed of their games without having a license from them. So we never really, the case didn't go anywhere, but it would have been interesting to see what, you know, because that has never really been resolved. Like if you're watching the game, what actually can you do with, you know, the content of the game? So, but what we discovered at AOL was the importance of content. And, you know, I think a lot of people at first thought that the internet was all going to be about being able to send emails and be in chat rooms. And what we saw ultimately is that when you put quality curated content, that was actually a much bigger traffic driver than just simply the utilities. And, you know, it was a lot easier to monetize the content as opposed to the utilities. You know, it's kind of a funny story, but like we invented instant messaging at AOL, AOL Instant Messenger. And, you know, we used to get called in front of all sorts of regulators and because they would argue that we were a huge monopoly because we had like 97% of the instant messaging market share, whatever that means. And I used to say, I don't think it is a monopoly. And if it is, it's the world's dumbest monopoly because we make like no money on it. Like, it's not just that we don't make a profit. We don't make any revenue. We could never figure out how to monetize instant messaging. Phone companies did that. So they're the smart ones there.
So while you were at AOL, you know, I'd love to hear how you developed your relationship with Steve Case and Ted Leonsis, because after AOL, you went with them over to Monumental. I mean, I'd love to hear how that relationship started, because it wasn't the big company that America Online or AOL became, you know, when you first got involved, right?
No, we were a pretty small little company. And yeah, so I mean, obviously I you know, met Ted early on. He was, you know, one of the big people at AOL. His company had been purchased by AOL a couple of years before. And so I think when I first started there, Ted was kind of president of the network. He was in charge of all the content on AOL. And Steve Case was really remarkable. And, you know, when you talk about leadership, I mean, Steve really is one of the great leaders that I've ever been around. And I think one of the reasons is he was able to articulate a vision, and it was a well thought out, but he was able to articulate that vision, what it kind of meant for everyone, like what they had to do to get there. And then he stayed on the message. And, you know, whatever you were doing had to kind of relate back to this message and to this vision. And, you know, when you look at it, that's what successful companies are able to do. They're able to reduce what they do to a fairly compact, set of principles or metrics or whatever, and then they just execute on them. But they always keep those front of mind, and that's what Steve did. He kept everyone kind of moving in the same direction, which was important because everyone out there at the time is trying this, and you're having all these different competitors, like MSN is in the Yahoo is new. I mean, all these folks. So having someone who had a vision early on, and kept us focused on that was really critical. And a lot of people over the years would say that Steve was kind of the brains, and for a lot of people, Ted was kind of the heart and soul of the company. Which, if you know Ted, right, you can see how that would be true. I mean, everyone loved him, and he loved everybody. So, and the thing is, like, that's actually him. He's the most genuine person you're ever going to meet. You kind of think, oh, someone can't be that nice, and Ted is actually that nice. So.
The amazing thing, Randy, I think, back, I believe it was like in the late 90s, early, maybe it was either 99 or 2000, you probably know the date when Ted had first bought the Capitals.
Like 98-ish? I don't know the exact date. I should, I feel like, but.
So right around there, yeah. we had known each other from his, like you, in the AOL days, and he bought the team. We were talking about something on the phone one day, and then a few days later, a Washington Capitals sweater shows up. Their jersey shows up at my office, and I was like, "Wow, that's amazing! Like, what a good guy! What a really nice person!" Exactly what you just said.
Yeah. And what you see, his love of the teams, his love of sports, like that's all completely genuine too. I mean, shortly. He took me on a tour of the new Caps practice facility a bunch of years ago when he had asked me to come over to the teams and help him there. And he was so excited, because they have this beautiful state-of-the-art facility in Arlington on top of a parking garage. And he, had the new red sweaters for the hockey team that no one had seen yet because they redesigned the logo. It was what became the Rock the Red. But his excitement, I mean, it was really amazing to see it. And everyone in the organization, felt that. So that's one of Ted's many talents, is getting people to feel the same thing that he feels.
So you were at AOL general counsel there. How did it work? How did you end up going over, to Monumental?
Well, so I think Ted and I both left AOL around the same time. So I want to say it was the end of 2006. And, we had gone through, we'd done the AOL Time Warner merger in 2000 and 2001. I mean, there had been a lot of ups and downs in that business. So Ted and I both left at the end of 2006, and he just called me up and invited me to dinner. And we went to a game and had dinner, and he said, I own the Caps, which I knew. And at some point he was going to have the right to buy the Wizards and the arena. And he owned a minority share, about 45% of both of those things. And the owner at the time, Abe Poland, who was a great man and had brought basketball and hockey to DC, was in his mid to late 80s, had a fairly serious progressive disease that was like Parkinson's, but not Parkinson's. And so what Ted asked me to do is to help get ready for the day when he was going to have the right to buy the rest of the team. And this was, the trick was, and I used to joke about it because I was going around trying to find investors and partners. And I would say I have a pretty easy job. I'm trying to sell a deal. I just don't know when it's going to happen or how much money is going to be involved. But
that's it.
But other than that, and of course it ends up being, when Mr. Poland dies, which I think is in the fall of 2009, kind of a tough time in the world to be out raising money, because you had the recession and debt crises in Spain and Greece, and but so we got it done in 2010. And that's what became Monumental Sports, is the combination of the Wizards, the Capitals, the Mystics of the WNBA, and then the arena, which at the time was the Verizon Center. Of course, now it's the Capital One Arena.
Which we were talking about the other day with one of our other guests, Joe Asher from William Hill, who talked about the Capital One Center and the fact that there is now the sports book right in the front of the Capital One Center.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, so it was. I was lucky enough to be involved with that. Before I kind of headed over to the Arena Football League, but in the wake of the Supreme Court deciding that sports betting could be legal in states, the folks in DC said, "Hey, we want to be the first," and they were really eager to be the first. And so we began working with them to help figure out how to do sports betting in the District of Columbia. And we came up with the idea of why not have a sports book in the arena. And, we had retail space. And so it was funny that the league, particularly the NBA, had come out with a set of guidelines about what you could and couldn't do, because they're great at that at the NBA, and very organized and very thorough. And so it was like no kiosks in the arena. And so I was having these conversations like, well, so what exactly counts as the arena? Because we had retail space. And so my thought was, well, we could have the Green Turtle, we can have all these places, and we're just the landlord. We don't own it. We just are the landlord. So why couldn't we just be the landlord of a sports book? And so we got the leagues to agree with that. And for me, the reason that we wanted to try to do it that way was we're trying to find another revenue stream, that we could do with the sports betting. Everyone already was striking jersey deals and sponsorship deals. And so we wanted to try to find another revenue source. And so having the sports book on site opened up a lot of opportunities, in terms of revenue generation, but also how you promote it. And, it opens up so many opportunities for what you can do. And obviously those depend on, if the NBA or the NHL is playing in the building that night, there are different rules, but, we, foresaw the day, like Arena Football League game, right? We're going to have you going back and forth to the sports book and making bets and, having a much more engaged experience than I think you've had in a lot of sports arenas prior to that.
Well, again, we're here with Randy Boe, our guest on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, who's now a senior advisor at our 76 Capital Sports Advisory business, and excited to have him on our show, hearing about the stories at Monumental when he was there, and maybe a couple other things I'd love to sort of touch on, Randy, at Monumental. I mean, you said you were there when you bought the Wizards. You guys did a brand new practice facility while you were there. Right. And you had the Arena Football League prior to you going over there as commissioner. You had all these. You were doing things around esports. You were doing sports betting. You were creating a new media network. I mean, you guys did it. We're doing everything. What was that like, kind of being in the middle of that and being an owner and being part of this ownership group, right? That kind of was doing kind of the next thing when a lot of other teams and owners and ownership groups weren't sure yet. But you guys were just going for it.
Well, in a lot of ways, it was like the experience at AOL. We were kind of like, well, what if we did this? It was, and being that it was Ted, right? It makes perfect sense that it would be that way. I mean, Ted obviously is a very creative person, and he loves, when people are creative and innovative. I mean, that's exactly the culture he wanted to foster. So, we would look at all sorts of things, and we did all sorts of things. I mean, we were one of the early entrants into esports, with Team Liquid, and and he's been a big backer of that, and now the NBA 2K franchise. So very early on involvement in that. The network was a really interesting thing, because when you look at particularly NBA and NHL teams, they're very dependent on their local broadcast deals. That and I mean, the NFL and Major League Baseball have these huge national deals, and every team gets so much that the local is still important, but it's very important in the NBA and NHL. And so as we looked down the road to renegotiating that eventually, one of the options we saw for ourselves was, if you could take the rights yourselves and build your own network, like that's a way to make really big money. And that's what the Mets did with SNY. It's what the Yankees did with the Yes Network. And so we started thinking, well, why couldn't we do that with a package? We had hockey and basketball rights. Why couldn't we, if we wanted to one day, go that route? So we started building out the network in anticipation of that day arriving. But we built it, and we had shoulder content from all the teams, and we started, doing high school content. I mean, but the idea was build a network, get our fans onto the network, and ultimately, as we build that platform out, that's going to make other monetization opportunities available to us. And that is the AOL model. Build a big platform and then put a lot of different stuff on it, and you'll have lots of different revenue sources and lots of different ways to monetize it.
Well, certainly that's the way it's working out for the team over at Monumental. And so while you were there, you're working on all of these different things, and then the arena. Then how did you transition over to then being the commissioner of the Arena Football League? So
one of the jobs I had at Monumental was doing corporate development and strategy, and got approached about the Arena Football League in like 2015, 2016. And so we looked at it and said, hey, this would be interesting. It fills some dates in the summertime when we didn't have that much, going on in the building. And there were, I think, 10 teams in the league spread out all over the country. So we sign up, and the league just crumbles to dust around us. The franchises on the West Coast fall away. The guys from KISS, who had the team in LA, decide that it's no longer fun. Although I did get a selfie with Gene Simmons, so that's got to be worth something.
Absolutely. I mean, you should maybe that should be in the background of all your Zoom calls now.
Exactly. Maybe that's what I should do. But so we believed in it as we got into it, and even with the league kind of imploding, we started to become believers in it and thinking, wow, this is really an interesting product. It fills an interesting niche. It's a fast paced. So we became bigger believers. And so ultimately, I think there were, we played one season when it was just Cleveland and Tampa and us and Philly, I guess. Maybe it was 5 teams. We decided to take a run at it in 2019. And we came up with a new business plan. We restructured the league so that the league owned and operated all of the teams. We expanded, so we had teams in 6 markets. We added Columbus and Atlantic City. We made sports betting and integrating sports betting into the game a huge priority. We made focusing on kind of the digital aspects of fandom a huge priority. And I think I was late for a meeting, and so they made me the commissioner. So, but it was fantastic. It was a great job, and I loved being the commissioner of the Arena Football League. I loved being able to go to the games. The players and fans are fantastic, and we had a lot of really clever ideas, I think. And we were out there trying to raise money, and we didn't raise as much as we needed. We knew we'd have to raise, a bunch, $50-60 million to get the league to scale, to national scale over a couple of years. So, but it was a great opportunity, and learned a lot, and saw that, and still believe sports betting is going to be the engine in sports. And I think it's going to start off as being an engine in some of the smaller niche sports, because frankly, they have more of an incentive and more of an opportunity to take risks and be creative than the big leagues do. But you're going to see it as a huge fan engagement tool, a way for teams to promote their own games. I mean, it's going to be in everything, I think.
Well, it was really great. I mean, the season before the league, I think, folded, the Arena League was working with VSiN, which was our portfolio company over here at 76 Capital. And then you did I thought it was, then you did a big ESPN deal, I think the last season, right? I mean, it was pretty incredible. I mean, the things that you did to kind of get that thing going. But again, you saw kind of what was next, and you were doing a lot of the things that were next, which quite frankly are a lot of the things that are now happening during COVID and that have been accelerated. So a lot of the things that you just mentioned, now the quote unquote big leagues are now racing towards, right? New types of technology, new data and analytics types in their business, sports betting, new digital ways to engage fans. I mean, all the stuff that you were working on at that point and incubating are now starting to become the norm.
That's exactly right. And I think, the pandemic has, of course, changed so much, and it's been so difficult in sports. But, there was already a lot of changing trends in how people consume sports and more broadly, how they consume media, particularly younger people. And, those people didn't go to games as often in person, and they didn't watch sports on TV. And so even before the pandemic, it was, well, how do you reach these people? And the answer was going digital. Well, now when no one can go to games, you have to be able to do that to continue to grow the audience. And, in a funny way, like what we saw with the NBA and the NHL and MLB, I mean, the way they did the playoffs and the way it was kind of, truncated, and it felt a little bit like binge viewing, right? I mean, you're going to binge view the NBA for the next, couple of weeks while they're doing playoffs. It started to feel very similar to that. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of change in sports and the way we do them, and the way we view them, and then the way they play them. I mean, that's going to have to change as well.
Right. So, I want to ask you this question because you were right there in the middle of it all. I mean, when you can't put fans in the stands, talk about all the different revenue streams that immediately are gone for a business.
Well, I mean, obviously ticket revenue goes, concession revenue goes. Most of the sponsorship deals that are sold are kind of on an impression basis. We're going to put your logo on the floor or on the ice, and X number of people are going to come to games. So, the value of those sponsorships gets affected adversely. So, I mean, it's a pretty significant hit for most teams to take, and the mix of local to national revenues depends, on the team and the league. But it's, NBA and NHL teams, I think for most of them, I would have to believe it's right around half of the revenues are affected.
Yeah, incredibly. So they have to find these new opportunities and really think about what are the next ways for them to drive revenue for their business. And Randy, I mean, that's what, I'm so excited to have you involved with us on our 76 Capital sports advisory business, because, at 76, on that side of the house at 76 Capital, I mean, we're all about thinking about what are the next things, right? What are the emerging areas in sports, whether it's sports betting, esports, the future of media, social responsibility? How do these things all play in to the future of sports? And I'd love to kind of get you some of your thoughts on what you see the future will look like in sports, based on a lot of these things that are happening, or maybe even some new things that you're keeping an eye on.
Well, I just want to say too, I've known you, Wayne, for a while, and I think the world of what you guys have been doing. I mean, you're always at the forefront, and always doing really interesting stuff. And the stuff that you guys do with VSiN, we did work with them at the AFL, and I actually believe that one of the mistakes we made was doing the ESPN deal, because I think being on ESPN.
So did we at the time, but
but without getting a lot of promotion, it's hard. You're kind of a voice in the wilderness, and some of the stuff we were talking about with the VSiN guys was really exciting. We were going to have betcasts. They were interested in kind of doing the color commentary and the play-by-play from their studio, which would have been awesome, and then baking in all the betting stuff. But in terms of
Randy, it's interesting about that, and just to touch on that, I mean, we did that with the XFL. When I say we, VSiN did that,
yeah.
And now with the the European Premier League. We are doing that right now on iHeartRadio, and it's really amazing to hear about these betcasts and to be able to, not only just do the normal play-by-play of the game, but the play-by-play of the numbers and how the lines are moving and what are the different opportunities for you to get in on different prop bets within the game. It's really fascinating. And again, it's not for everybody, but at the same time, it really does have you think about that game in different ways. And, it's just like, no one ever really thought that, initially, what is it now, 10 years or so now, that the red zone was going to be a thing.
Right.
How do you watch football without the red zone? And Houston has the green zone now that they have. And to be able to sort of see that this progress is really amazing. And I think we're just scratching the surface of betcasts and the future of viewing games and how things will look in the future.
Yeah, and I think being able to integrate sports betting into the gameplay is going to be such a fascinating experience, because separate and apart from the traditional bets and some of the more traditional prop bets, I mean, you can start crafting things and you can build them around sponsors. We were working with Fitbit trying to come up with a deal so that you could bet on player speeds, and you could for your own bets you could also see have the heart rate up there, because maybe we didn't have field goals in arena football, but I guess you could. We did have field goals, and just no one ever did it. But if you were betting on a field goal in the NFL, you'd kind of like to see the guy's heart rate, right? Yeah. Is it up there like 95 or something? Maybe you want to, but those kinds of opportunities, we thought were fascinating, and people really haven't scratched much more than the surface. But the other thing I wanted to say, there's been a lot of conversation around younger people and how they consume sports. And I think there was an article in the New York Times last week or so kind of making this point that those kids don't have cable subscriptions. They don't really watch TV. And that generation, if I can make some really gross generalizations, they're very much more keyed into experiences. When you talk to them, when I grew up, you watched the games from home, right? You sat on your sofa and you ate popcorn or a sandwich and you watched the games. And sometimes you'd have friends over, but you watched the games. Well, kids now, they don't really do that. I mean, unless they're going out to a bar or someplace, and then they all go do it together, and watching the game is part of the experience. And I think that's what you're going to have to start adapting to. And to me, sports betting is a way to get that group, that demographic back to watching games. Because, if they're going to be betting on the game, if they're going to be involved in every play and, doing it with their friends, that's a huge engagement tool. That's a great way to get them to tune in and stay tuned in.
Yeah, watching a game today means something completely different, right? I mean, it's than what it was. It's not just literally staring at the TV. It's engaging on Twitter and potentially betting on the game and checking your fantasy scores and seeing, and texting with your friends, and and we're using many other social media networks and watching the highlights on Instagram. I mean, it's really, really fascinating what's possible today and what things will look like in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And one of the things I think is interesting with what we work with on the 76 Capital Sports Advisory side is things are changing so fast. So as a team owner, as a league, you at times, or as a media network, you may need a little bit of help to kind of keep up with all the things that are now happening.
Absolutely. And, I think, a lot of people are out there, developing strategies around esports, and you're seeing more people, get into the ownership groups. But, unlike, the great thing about the leagues is they tell you exactly how to do things, right? When you buy an NBA franchise, they come in and they tell you exactly how you should be doing it. And they know what they're doing. I think with esports, and, there are so many different offerings, and I think that's a little harder, because you have to, do a lot more yourself than if you were buying an NBA or an NHL or a Major League Baseball team. And then I think, how you monetize it. I mean, there are lots of different models out there, and I'm not sure anyone has figured out, exactly which one is going to be the golden goose, or maybe there are going to be several different models. You have one revenue stream is the in-game purchasing component that you have in some games, which is, an astonishing amount of money gets spent for stuff that literally does not exist. I don't even know how you calculate the margins on that. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the virtual worlds, virtual goods it's incredible. And then you look at the numbers that came out, just recently, where last month in October of 2020, there was $3 billion bet on sports.
Right.
I mean, it's fascinating when you think about that. I mean, you think about how, sports betting and this is one of the questions I want to ask you, because sports betting was only legal in the state of Nevada up until May 14th of 2018, when PASPA was overturned. You were involved in professional sports, sports teams, both basketball and hockey. What did you tell from a legal side of things? What did you tell the players, people in your organization about casinos, walking into sports books, placing bets, knowing people in that industry in general? Did you have any sort of rules or anything around that, or talk to people about that prior to PASPA being overturned?
Well, the leagues each have their own compliance organizations, and rules about what you can bet on and more importantly, what you can't bet on. And so they come around and do that kind of education. But yeah, I mean, you do have to start educating people like, okay, so, even though you've got a sports book here in the building, you can't go down there and be betting on Wizards games. Don't do that.
But I mean, but in fact, before all of this, right? Before all of this, when there weren't sports books anywhere other than in Nevada, right. I mean, your executives, had they gone to Vegas and started betting on the Wizards or the Capitals, that probably wouldn't have been a good thing.
No, and the NBA actually watches that. I mean, the leagues watch that pretty carefully. They monitor what betting activity there is, like most leagues do, and pay attention to that, any kind of worrisome bets or trends.
And now that world has flipped, not from the betting on your own teams, but the world's flipped where, from a business perspective, the MGMs, the William Hills of the world, all the major sports books now are doing deals with the sports teams in a complete. So the world's flipped from not being able to do anything with them, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, you better know those people over at the top sports books across the country.
Yeah, it really is stunning, and I want to give more credit to Ted. Ted saw the potential for sports betting and got involved, way before the PASPA decision, actually got announced. So he was there and saw, hey, this is going to be a really big opportunity, for the teams in Washington, but for teams and leagues generally. So that was, being way out there, way early was, I think pretty important, and gave us a chance to kind of think through all the different ways that you could approach it, and all the different kinds of value that I think you're seeing people start to drive.
Well, look, this has really been great. I mean, Randy, thank you so much for joining us on our 76 Capital leadership series. I mean, it's been great. I can't wait to think about and start working together with all the things that, all the experience that you've had, and now sort of being able to really think about what's next and work with you on that, and work with, incredible organizations that are kind of doing the next thing. And this is really going to be exciting.
I think so too, and I couldn't be happier than to be joining you guys. I've thought the world of you for a long time, and so to be able to be part of the organization, I'm thrilled.
Well, again, it's been great having Randy Boe, now a senior advisor at 76 Capital Sports Advisory, the former general counsel of AOL, and the guy who helped transform and build Monumental Sports with Ted Leonsis, and the former commissioner of the Arena Football League. Randy Boe, thank you so much. And you can follow Randy at Randall Boe on Twitter, and you'll see a lot about Randy and 76 Capital over the next several months and hopefully years, and all the things that we do together. Again, Randy, thank you and welcome to 76 Capital.
All right. Thanks so much, Wayne. It's really great. Thank you. Thank you.